Yo, good day, gents, and welcome to another episode of Father's Fire. My name's Jody Sedrick, as you know, and every week we get together to explore the joys, the challenges, the triumphs, the sorrows, and yes, the fun of being a dad. And it is midsummer, and if you know anything about me, I'm having a lot of fun with my kids out on the lake. We've been out on the lake probably 2-3 times a week doing a little bit of wake surfing, so that's always a little comfort and peace and rejuvenation for the soul. Plus, just having fun with the kids is awesome. And of course, 4th of July, blowing up stuff. I mean, who can't complain about that? That's nothing more American than blowing up stuff. And my buddy Reed Young, he goes all out, and it's always fun. But this year, dude, what's up with the season? Because dude, 1 week it's 100, and next week, I mean, July 4th, it was cold and rainy. I'm like, dude, I've never had a cold, rainy July 4th. So anyway, we're enjoying the season. And I'm not sure if you guys know or if you're on TikTok, but TikTok, there's a new movement called Dads Supporting Dads and Dudes Supporting Dudes. So I've been following a lot of these guys and going through their TikTok content, and it's been great. I mean, a lot of these dads have really good hearts, really good missions and purposes, and I stumbled across our guest today, Tyler Davis. Welcome. How are you today?
Thanks for having me. I'm great, man.
Oh, dude, I'm super excited. I was scrolling through your TikTok, and you actually struck a chord with me because one of your TikToks was talking about being an adopted dad. So congratulations. And you talked about, the joys, challenges, the whole nuances of going through adoption. I don't think people realize what a landmine that can be, both during the process and even after. So I wanted to reach out to you. So thank you for being my guest.
Oh, happy to be here.
Yeah. So before we get into adoption, tell me a little bit about you and your family.
Yeah, I'm 44, born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee. Still live here. My wife also born and raised here in Nashville. You can take our house and draw about a 12-mile radius around our house, and you'll hit 93% of our family.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, so like my dad lives probably a mile down the road. My brother lives 3.5 miles down the road. My sister lives a mile down the road. Like we're everywhere. My wife, the same thing. I work in IT for a healthcare analytics company based out of Kansas City. She is actually a nurse for a private practice OBGYN. Worked in labor and delivery in the hospital for 12 years before moving into private practice as a nurse. And yeah, we adopted our son Cameron 8 months ago. He just turned 8 months on the 26th of June, so finalized that in April. So it's been a whirlwind.
Congratulations!
Thank you. It's quite the story.
So let's talk about that, because I think a lot of people think that adoption is an easy process. It sounds like you did a domestic adoption. We actually did a foreign adoption, which has a whole different level of hoops.
Oh, yes.
So let's talk about, what inspired you guys, first of all, to adopt, and second of all, what was that experience like for you guys?
Funny enough, adoption has always been on both of our radars. And so when we got married, we've been married, this will 11 years in October, this coming October. And when we got married, we were always talking and said, the normal, how many kids do you want, blah, 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 all that. And we both at the same time kind of mentioned adoption. And it was like, it kind of struck us both. So it's always been there. Like I said, she worked in women's health, still works there. So she's seen that side of it. She's seen mothers come in and having babies who can't keep them, don't want to keep them. So she's seen it from that side of, there's children out there who I can give a home to, who I can give a good life to. Before I went in the IT business, I was a youth pastor. So, I saw it from this side. I saw all those the kids who needed help. I see the kids who needed someone. And again, I knew this is something I can do. I can give these children a good home. I can raise them in a loving family. They've got support all around them. Our church community, all of that. It's always been something that we both said, regardless of how many children we have, we always want to adopt. Well, we haven't been able to have our own children, so adoption being there in the background has always been like, something we want to pursue. And then I guess 4 years ago, really got into it. And it took us 3.5 years before we finally got Cameron. So it was a lot of ups and downs, a lot of not getting picked, a lot of, this birth mother's interested, and then sorry, she went with another family. So there's a lot of up, there's a lot of down, there's a lot of just mental exhaustion, emotional exhaustion. Financially, it's not easy. It's worse for the overseas than it is for domestic. But and we talked about an overseas adoption, but with everything going on in the world, it was just like, I can't afford to be stranded somewhere. Like I can't afford to get over there and be caught by what's going on in the world and be stranded there. And there are so many children here who need somebody that domestic is where we felt called to. So yeah.
I like that phrase, felt called to, because a lot of people ask us, it's like, why did you adopt? And we were very similar to you, where when Judy and I got married, we always knew that we were gonna have kids, but in the back of our minds, we were always open to foster care or adoption. And so when my wife started volunteering at a orphanage in Haiti, I didn't really think about it, but then one day, things just kind of fell into place, and we're like, all right, this looks like it is right for our family. And boy, I had no idea how long it was going to take. I mean, we were like you, 3.5 years in the process, and then due to the earthquake in Haiti, a lot of the adoptions were expedited because of the humanitarian travesty that was going on in that country. And so all of a sudden we're like, get to Miami, your kids are coming, and we're like scrambling, right? So there is, like you said, there's a lot of emotional ups and downs because there are a lot of hoops that you have to jump through to get through the process, background checks and interviews and parenting classes. And
they want to know where every cent of your money goes, and like what's your debt, what's your income, what are your monthly bills, and we've been blessed to be in a situation where financially, when I gave answers on the financial questionnaire, they came back and they're like, no, you didn't answer this right. And I'm like, no, financially, this is where we are. And they're like, I've never seen this before. And I was like, well, don't question me on it. I'm not going to lie on the form, because that, that invalidates everything. But yeah, I mean, and I always joke. I said, if people had to go through what you have to go through to adopt a child just to have a child, no one would have a child. No one would ever have a kid if you had to go through this just to adopt a child. I've never felt more like invaded.
That's a good descriptor, man. Because you really are put under a microscope. And I remember when we started the process here in Idaho, we'd already had 4 kids.
Yeah.
And so we started the adoption process, and they're like, "Oh, you need to go to these parenting classes." And I'm like, uh, "Wait a sec, I already had 4 kids. What do you mean I need to go
Right.
to parenting classes?" Um,
Right.
but
And
it's
then,
interesting because I'm really grateful for those classes because they opened my eyes to the reality that there is a lot of trauma that comes with adopted children. And the way I realized very early on that the way that I parented before was not going to work with my new kids. And I needed to become more than I was before. I needed to become a different dad. And that was very eye opening, very soul searching, and very heart wrenching because I had to
mhm.
admit to myself that the way that I parented before, while it was very effective and very good for my kids, it was not going to work for my new kids. And so
Mhm.
I needed to really level up and become a different version of who I was. And that was a humbling process.
Yeah, I can only imagine coming up from that side. You know, I also I like to bring levity to situations. And we'd sit in our parenting classes, and this was in the middle of the pandemic, so we were doing it all over Zoom, right? And so it's us and 5 or 6 other families on this Zoom call. And I like to joke around, and I'd make a joke, and the teacher would be like, "We don't do that here. We don't joke around." And my wife
It's like,
would, yeah, and my wife would be sitting there and be like, "Well, actually, that statistic is not valid anymore. This is the new statistic." And she'd be like, "No, you're wrong." And I'm like,
mm.
"She works. She does this for a living. Like we were not the class favorites by any means, but no, it those classes were definitely eye opening. I was like, I've dealt with kids. This will be fine. And you sit in those classes, and it's like, oh, you don't think about depending on what age you get them at, you know, how much, like you said, how much trauma they could have experienced, and just the fact of being separated from a parent and having to go to a new family, the trauma that's there.
Well,
I mean,
it's interesting because when our kids came here, they came from Haiti where it's 80 plus degrees in the winter, coming to Idaho and it's like 20. And I mean, just the climate shock alone. And I remember one day we were out in our cul-de-sac and there were some cracks in the road where they had repaired with the black tar and stuff. And
mhm,
my kids were all afraid because they had just gone through the very traumatic
mhm,
experience of the earthquake, and they're like, "Oh, what's happening, are we gonna go through this again?" And something as simple as that we as adults, sometimes even adults, boy, we can really be hit by trauma and tough situations, you know, and being able to step back and look at it from the lens of a child takes some real discipline because I think a lot of times we're impatient with them to connect with us, to be part of our family, instead of allowing them the growth that they need to build trust. And obviously, it sounds like you adopted Cameron at a younger age than we did. We had our kids come to our home at 8 and 9, but
mhm.
even as an infant, I don't think a lot of people realize that there can still be separation anxiety and connectivity issues because it was interesting. We were in one of those classes, and I asked the question. I go, "Yeah, but what about infant adoption?" She said, "Well, a lot of times there are attachment issues even with infants because when you think about a mother who has been looking forward to having a baby and she's pregnant, she, when she's caressing her belly, is pulling from the bottom up into our heart. and she's always kind of caressing and pulling the baby into her. Where in the case of an unwanted pregnancy, the women unconsciously are pushing down and away from her heart.
Mm.
And the baby, even in the womb, feels that disconnection or connection. And
Mm-hmm.
so have you guys, I mean, I know it's early on in your process, have you guys felt any kind of attachment scenarios with you and your family?
So we got Cameron at 2 days old. And like I said, it was a whirlwind story. Um, we on Sunday, it was October 26th, was Monday. On that Sunday, the 25th, my wife and I had sat down and we were having I don't know how much longer I can do this conversation again. You have that a lot throughout the process. I just don't know how longer I can do this. We're having that conversation. And then Monday morning, I sat down, I work from home. I sat down to start work, and about 8:15, one of our attorney calls that we were working with, and said, "Hey, just want to call and check in on you, see how you're doing." And I haven't talked to this attorney in a year. And I was like, "Well, we're good. We're good. How are things down there?" She's in Boca Raton, Florida. And I was like, "How are things down there?" She's like, "Well, it's October in Florida." And I was like, "Oh, say no more." She said, "I just want to see how y'all were doing, see if y'all had matched yet or not." And I said, No, we haven't matched. We're still waiting." And she said, "Well, I have some good news for you." I said, "What?" I said, "What's that?" She said, "I have a baby for you." I said, "You what?" She's like, "Yeah, but there's one catch. You have to be in Florida today to get it." And I said, "What?" She's like, "You have to be in Boca today to get this baby if you want it." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'm 99.99999% sure I know the answer, but let me call my wife. Give me 20 minutes. Let me talk." And I told her, and she's like, "Absolutely. Yes, yes." Just lost it, broke down in the middle of her office. Everybody thought somebody had died. But she's like, "We got a baby." So we get down to Boca at 11:30 Monday night, or 11 o'clock. And by 11:30, we had Cameron. Um, and spent a week in Boca, and then another 3 days in Destin waiting to get approval to cross state lines. Before what normally takes 2 weeks to be able to allow you cross state lines back home took 24 hours. Our social worker and our attorney said, "I've never
Wow.
seen it take 24 hours in our life. Never before in my career have I seen it go this fast." I was like, "Well, it's a God thing, absolutely a God thing." So we're home. He's at home by 9 days old. We're home. But um, those first couple of weeks, they always tell you, and I don't know in your case what they said, but in our case as a newborn, they said for the first 6 weeks, one or both of you has to be home from work to spend time and to bond with the child. Those first 6 weeks, you don't let anybody else hold that child. No one else feeds that child. No one else changes that child except for the two of you, because that's how you build that trust. That's how you build that relationship. After 6 weeks, if you want to start letting people hold them, you can. Now, when we got home, grandparents, we let them hold for a picture, and then that was it. Like, no one long period of time. But it was interesting to see the first few nights, because he was so little. He slept all the time, but he was uneasy the first few days, despite only having been with his birth mother for not even 48 hours. You know, but those first few days was uneasy. You could always tell he just wasn't comfortable. He didn't cry a lot, he just, when you hold him, he would just kind of, he had that look like something's different. I don't know you. But it only lasted really a couple of weeks. And I really think that 6-week bonding period is what did it. Is what really made all the difference in the world. Now, now it's like we've been mom and dad from consent. Like, he knows nothing else, and it's like we belong together. So it's fascinating to see, fascinating to live through the process, and just to watch. I'm sure it was a comedy to watch us in Florida. We flew to Boca with nothing. We had no clothes for him. We had no diapers. We had nothing. I got down there with 7 pairs of khaki shorts and 1 t-shirt, and my wife got down there with the exact opposite. It was like, we had no idea. Like, we were just throwing stuff in a bag. I'm sure it was a comedy watching us. We get to the hotel in Boca, and our attorney had put our car seat in our car, and she did it wrong, so it got stuck. So we just had to carry him in sans baby seat, and it's almost midnight. We look like Mary and Joseph trying to find a place to stay for the night. But it was, those first couple of nights was, he just kind of he would look at us and be like, you're not familiar. You don't feel familiar. But after a week or so, he was like, okay, you're my people. You're my people.
That brings back a flood of memories, because we, like I said earlier, we were 3.5 years in the process, and with no target date of when it was going to happen. And they called us and said, you need to get to Miami. And that was, I think, on a Sunday or Monday. And we had to be there by Friday. And so we had to move rooms. We had to get beds. We had to get clothes. We had to get hotels and flight tickets. And, and it was amazing how our community just came together. My brother donated the hotel points, and, somebody donated car rental, and people all of a sudden, I got bunk beds. And dude, it's just like all of a sudden this door opened to a flood of blessings and kindness and just open hearts to make it happen. But I remember there's one moment when we're flying from Miami to Boise, and I'm watching our son. He's looking out the window, and I could see kind of that same look that you're describing. Like, what has just happened? Where am I going? Who are these people? How am I going to connect with them? And Judy and I mean, for the first 2 years, there was always one of us at home. Always. There was a very strong need for us to be in our home. There was a lot of things that we had to work through, and a lot of trust and love that needed to be built. And one of the things, we brought them home when they were 8 and 9. And one of the things that really helped us build trust was we were really, we made a mistake. Mistake 1, our family was really into snow skiing and snowboarding. And so, like, the first or second week they were here, we took them up to the mountain, and these poor kids were just freezing to death. They were miserable, right? And so I never took them back up for a lot of years after that. So, we were trying to integrate them into our home without really considering what that looked like to them. But in the summer, the kids were really excited to get them out on the boat and teach them to wake surf and wakeboard. And, you know, we were still really working through that connection as a family. And so the kids, they were really excited. They got out, they're showing them how to wake surf, and, and they're excited. They see it. But then when you're out in the middle of the lake and you're standing on the back of your boat on the platform and you've never gotten into a lake, you're like, yeah, I'm not so sure about this. And my daughter Cynthia was like not having any of it. She's like, I mean, she was all excited, but then when it came to stepping out on that platform, I'm like, it's okay. So I had to be very purposeful in introducing her to that experience. And it really laid the foundation for her to trust me. So what I did was I sat down on the platform and had her sit next to me, got her used to having her feet in the water, and the water overcoming on the platform and getting our butts wet. And then I'm all right, I'm gonna get in the water now, and you just sit there. So I got in the water, and I'm holding her hand still. I'm like, all right, come in. She's still not wanting to. I'm like, come on. So I kind of pulled her into the water, and man, she instantly like grabbed my neck and just like choking me to death. And finally, I'm able to kind of get a little room between her and I, and I'm like, look at my eyes. I got you. I'm here with you. And just kind of, it created this really cool environment where she had to trust me. And I was able to communicate with her eye to eye, heart to heart, and get her into a position where, I could turn her around and let Judy pull the rope a little bit. And the whole time I'm speaking words of comfort. I got you. I'm here with you. And that first pull is like, whoa, and she slaps in the water, comes up, she's all scared. I immediately run to her. And I love that experience because it reminds me that we as dads sometimes we need to slow down. We need to really slow down and be purposeful in building trust with our kids. And this applies to anything. Them learning how to play baseball or learning an instrument or whatever it is. We sometimes forget that it's their first experience doing something and we expect them to just get it instead of being a guide, a confidant, a coach, someone that they can turn to when they're scared and put their arms around us and cling to us. And I think a lot of times we're too in a hurry to have them succeed that we don't enjoy the process of helping them succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you said something that kind of struck me just a second ago when you talked about, you were speaking words of comfort and things like that when you were in the water with her. And it made me think back to, we're still up and down at night. He's going through his sleep regressions and things like that because he's just started crawling and all that. So I think back to especially those first few nights when you're up with him at night and he's crying or you're holding him and he just won't go to sleep. The number of times you just look at him and you say, "Daddy's got me. Daddy's here." He doesn't understand it, but he can feel it. Even at that age, he can feel Dad's here. He doesn't understand what it means, but he knows, oh, he's always going to comfort me. He's always going to be there. I'm upset. There's somebody here holding me. Or mom's got you. Mom's here. That helps him understand I'm not alone. There's always going to be support for me, even at that young age. And that really, that brought back those memories of that first week in the hotel where it's just me, my wife, and a newborn who we had no idea was going to be in our lives until 18 hours before it happened. Just it being able to be that for him, and even now, like before we came on here, he was crying, and I went and picked him up, and I was like, "Hey, bud, it's okay. Dad's here. Dad's got you, and everything's okay." And he kind of stopped crying and kind of looked at me and kind of pulled back and went, and just that light in his eyes was like, "It's Dad. I'm safe." That kind of thing.
That's
It was
good.
just
That's good. I love that. I want to go back to something that we kind of glossed over, and I want to talk about how you walked with your wife through the process of adoption, because I think a lot of times we miss that opportunity to talk about what that looks like. So, what did that look like for you and your wife as you guys went through the ups and the downs and the second guessing is like, gosh, is this ever going to happen? And are we really doing the right thing? When's God going to open our home to a child? What did that look like for you, and how were you a comfort to your wife through that?
um, I would love to say it was all sunshines and roses between the two of us during the process. I'd love to say we were both there and rocks for each other, but just like every situation, there were bad times with the good. There was a lot of prayer and a lot of scripture, um, a lot, a lot of prayer, and a lot of we had to be real with each other. And when you first start the process and you start meeting with these people and these agencies, and they're like, oh, we average 18 months and we're matched with with a child and all this, and so you get your hopes up, and they say, hey, we've got a potential birth mother, do you want to see her, are you interested in presenting, because they give you very little information. They're like, now it's like age, race, and does she have, honestly, now, does she have a drug problem? That's what you get essentially to go on to say, yeah, we want to present to this birth mother. And so it was a lot of, we spent a lot of time talking during the application process of what is it we're open to? What is it we're open to committing to for, 7, 8 months and longer after the birth of being in Cameron's life? What is it that we're okay with as far as a birth mother? And it came to a point where we said there are certain drugs that, marijuana, there's no long-term effects. There's no studies that say there's long-term effects and harming the child. But we came to a point where we had a long conversation and said, okay, this is where we draw the line. If you're doing these things, then sorry, we're not going to be considered. As much as we know somebody needs to take your child, the potential down the road problems and having you in our life and our family's life in the long run is not going to be good for us. So we had to have those hard conversations of there are children out there who we're going to turn away when all we want is a child. So that was tough. But we had to be honest with each other, no matter what. When we would present, you had those first couple of times, you get excited because you're like, oh, I want to present. And you're like, no, she's going to pick me. She's going to pick me because no one else is going to present to her. When in reality, you're one of 40. You're one of 40 people. And if they said on average, if they made it through 5 or 6 of the profile books, they were doing great. Normally, they like the first 3, they pick one. So if you're not in that first 3, you're not even considered. So there's a lot of, okay, now you want to present, it'll be a week before we have a decision for you. So that week of just what's going to happen, what's going to happen. Has you made a decision? Has you made a decision? And then you get she really liked you, but she went with another family. Okay, well, why? They don't tell you why. They just say they went with another family. So you get your hopes up, and then it's a down. And for us, she took it a lot harder than I did. The first couple of times when we decided to present, we have some friends who had gone through adoption twice, and they kind of helped guide us through a lot of this. So we were like, we're going to tell our whole crew of people. We're going to tell everybody. We want everybody praying. We want everybody involved. And when they're like, how'd it go? We're like, oh, we didn't get picked. And they're like, oh. And you have to deal with that. And it was like, every time we presented, that group we told got smaller and smaller and smaller until it was just literally family. Like my dad, because my mom passed away right when we started the process. So with my dad, her parents, her sister, and my brother and sister, like that was it. Nobody knew we were presenting unless we got to that, that final point, because I couldn't do the constant every time I saw somebody, how's it going? What have you heard? Have you heard? It got to the point where we just couldn't do it. And it hurt her more with every no. It got harder and harder and harder because she kept going, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? Why don't they like me? I said, you have to have those conversations where, honey, it's not you. It's nothing you did. They're reading a book of our lives. They've taken our lives and condensed it into about 24 pages. And a majority of that's pictures. And our social workers saying, these people can see a picture and say, oh, that family does matching Christmas pajamas. I don't want my child to have anything to do with that. They're out. Like it could be something as little as that. Or we worked with majority of adoption agencies in Florida, and they could say, honestly, oh, they're Tennessee fans. I don't want my child growing up a Tennessee fan. They're out. Or, ooh, they play guitar. I want my child in that family because they're musically inclined. Like, it could be something as simple as that. You never know. And it's like, honey, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just how it goes. And there was a lot of those conversations and a lot of, like I said, just prayer and scripture reading and talking. We talked a lot. And sometimes it caused arguments and disagreements, but you work through those. I think I suffered a little bit more in silence because I needed to be there for her. But not to say she wasn't there for me, but I wanted to be, as we are as men and soon to be fathers, we want to be the strong one. We want to be that rock. I suffered more in silence, I think. And she was like, why aren't you as upset? I was like, I am. But right now my focus is on being there for you. I'll deal with me later. Like you see in this movement on TikTok with his dad supporting dads, dudes supporting all these guys, all the guys who do the unseen things, and we see you as you see it everywhere on TikTok now. For all the men who are hiding things and just pushing things down, we're here for you. I think I spent most of my time doing that, being that person, push things down so I could be there for other people. And the day we got Cameron was the happiest and saddest day of my life, I think. Happiest because our dream had come true, saddest because of all the people who are not here anymore who would never get to experience Cameron in their lives. And I don't know if I've ever told anybody that until just now. I don't even know if I've told my wife that. But yeah, it was a lot of just trust, a lot of scripture, a lot of prayer, and a lot of honest conversations.
Yeah, I appreciate you being so authentic with that. Because I think, well, I know most of us men, we want to be the strength for our loved ones. And a lot of times we do suffer in silence. We put it on our backs, we put it on our hearts, and we push it in a nice little box. And sometimes that box never gets reopened. And it, in some situations, it cankers, it rots, it kind of eats at us from the inside out. And one of the things that I'm liking, that I'm seeing, is that we as men are having more open conversations with each other, letting each other know, you know what, you're not alone. You know, I see you. I see you sitting in your car after a really frustrating day and collecting your thoughts and putting your heart in a good place so that you can walk into the house and be the strength that you need. Sadly, a lot of men put that down so far that it comes out in the form of anger and shortness and impatience, instead of finding a safe place to take a look at that and tear it apart and break it down and address it. And I think we as men need to do a better job of finding a friend, a confidant that we can go and go, you know what, I need to talk about this. And I will admit readily admit that, you know, I've been blessed because my wife and I have a really good relationship, and we can have those deep conversations. But I also have two really good friends, Sean Hart and Reed Young, that, dude, they kind of have the gift. I don't know what it is, but God speaks to them when I need them. And they will, out of the blue, call me up and say, "Hey, Jody, you're on my mind. What's going on?"
Yeah.
And I know that they are a safe place. Sometimes Reed calls me up and say, "Hey, Jody, you're on my mind. What's up? Let's go riding motorcycles, or let's go chasing each other around in our convertibles and go as fast as we can." Or, you know, sometimes it's just, "Come over and help me bend this wrench," right? And sometimes you don't even have to say anything. You just need to be with somebody. And that's one of the things that I really like about my relationship with these men, is sometimes just being in their presence is a lift, right? It refortifies me, it rejuvenates me, it allows me to go, you know what, I'm seen. And I think all of us men need to be seen, especially by our wives, but also by other men, and go, you know what, I got you, I understand. Sometimes it's lonely suffering in silence. And so let me sit with you for a minute. So let me ask you a question. We've been going a little longer than I planned, but let me kind of looking back at both you and your relationship with your wife, maybe going through the process or being a dad. What are one or two things that you would counsel or give advice to men that they should do for their families and for themselves?
I think you kind of really just hit the biggest one on the head. Is find you someone, find you a guy or two or a crew of guys that you can be yourself with, that you can be open and honest and raw with. Um, because it's like you said, if we don't, it comes out as anger and frustration, and that doesn't help anybody. That does not help the family situation at all, because just because you're dealing with something and you don't know how to deal with it, it gets taken out on the family, and that's not healthy. That causes more problems. The other thing I would say is also be okay being raw with your and honest with your wife. Going through this process, there were times when we had to be just brutal with each other and brutally honest about we get a birth mother and be like, do we want to present? I don't feel this is right for us. Well, why? Because A, I don't think we're in a place right now. B, I don't think it's a good situation. Like, you have to just be raw and honest with them, and you have to be okay with that. They're not like us. They don't try to fix everything. That's our problem. We want to fix everything. They don't. It drives her crazy when she just wants to vent about a day, and I'm like, okay, what can we do? How can we fix that? Or like I said, I bring levity, I bring jokes. She'll text me to vent about her boss. I'm like, go punch her in the kidney. Like, she's like, she's being so slow. I said, tell her you're buying a cattle prod. Go poke her with a cattle prod. Like, she's like, I don't need that. That's not what I need. I'm like, I was just trying to lighten the mood. She's like, I just need to vent. Okay.
I need you to listen, babe.
But also know that she's willing to be that too.
Yeah.
And I think you also, I think you've nailed it several times. Being patient with your children, not expecting them to be perfect the first time around.
Yeah.
If they're learning a new skill, if they're trying to learn a sport or an instrument or whatever it is, whether they're trying to learn computers or if they want to play chess or whatever it is, don't expect them to be perfect right out the gate.
Yeah.
I
love that.
That encouragement. Be that encouragement. Be their biggest cheerleader, not their biggest critic.
I love that, man. Awesome. Well, Tyler, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for opening your heart and your family to me and other men. I look forward to continued conversations both on TikTok indirectly or directly. And man, I'm super excited for you. So you and your wife, you're in for an amazing adventure. It only gets crazier. It gets fun. It gets sad. It gets adventurous. It gets troublesome. But dude, being a dad is amazing. My youngest are 23. My oldest is 31, and dude, we're still involved in their lives. It doesn't end, and it's a joy. And I love talking about being a dad. So thank you so much. So how do people follow and connect with you?
Follow me on TikTok. I never thought I'd be a TikTok guy. I'm on TikTok. I've been there on for a week, and in a week, because of this dad supporting dads, I've got almost 1,600 followers in a week.
That's awesome. That's great.
Let me see. It's bad when you're so new to it, you don't even remember your TikTok handle. Tyler Davis 1453 on TikTok.
There you go.
Best place to find me. And
that's awesome.
If you're out there and you're dealing with the adoption journey and need somebody to talk to, vent, advice, happy to do it. More than happy to talk.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much again, man. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing your story and your heart. And I'm so excited for you and your lovely wife and your boy Cameron. It's going to be an amazing adventure. And you're going to learn a lot about yourself.
It's already have been so far in 8 months. Whew.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, well, thank you so much. And you guys listening, thank you so much for tapping in. do. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget, I do have my books out on Amazon. But How Far Must I Go? A Journey in Faith. It's been out there since the beginning of the year, and it's been amazing. I've been getting some really good feedback, and so thank you for your comments. And I've actually started the follow-up book to that. So it's always fun. But thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate the examples that you are. And let's go impact our families by being the best men that we can be, that God determined that we could be. And let us discover those gifts that will touch our kids' lives and the lives to come. So thank you so much for tapping in. And we will check you same time, same bad channel just next week. See ya.